I always thought peace had a sound. The slow creak of my wooden bridge, the soft splash of trout in the creek below, and the wind brushing through the pine trees. For 15 years, that little bridge carried nothing heavier than my pickup and a few neighbors' kids on bicycles. Then one morning I heard a new sound, the deep grinding roar of a cement truck. And behind the wheel, HOA President Karen herself waving like she owned the place. By the time I stepped outside, the bridge was trembling, mud swirling in the water and my blood boiling. When I told her she was trespassing, she smirked and said, "Then maybe you should build a stronger bridge, Mike." That's when I knew this wasn't about concrete, it was about control. She thought she could drive over me the same way she drove over my bridge. She was wrong. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because you won't believe how this bridge fight ends. The creek behind my cabin is one of those quiet, stubborn things that ignores calendars. Spring snowmelt swells it. August turns it into a ribbon of glass. 15 years ago, when I signed the deed for this parcel, I built my bridge across that stubborn line with Miguel and a rented post pounder. We measured the span between bedrock shelves, bored the pilings through packed gravel, laid the beams, lag-bolted the stringers, and decked it with kyline-dried planks I sealed by hand, while a golden retriever named Scout watched from the bank. It wasn't a trophy. It was a promise that I could come home without asking anyone's permission. A promise is a boundary in wood form. People forget that. When the HOA formed 2 years ago, I didn't object. I even paid the first assessment $50 for neighborhood beautification because I like a good streetlight as much as anyone. But boards like ours grow like ivy, slow, polite, and choking if you let them. Karen got herself elected president the way a thunderstorm elects itself a problem suddenly and everywhere. She favored clipboards, emergency emails, and the phrase for the community the way a chef favors salt. The first letter I got from her was framed as a courtesy reminder: front setbacks must remain clear of non-compliant structures. The photo attached showed my canoe rack, which sits 20 feet inside my line alone and harmless. I wrote back with a copy of my survey and a polite note. Respectfully, my front setback begins at the county right-of-way, not the creek. The bridge and the approach are private. She replied with a smiley face, and, "Let's discuss at the next board meeting." At the meeting, she brought a laminated map printed from who knows where. No topography, wrong scale, and the creek drawn like a cartoon snake. She tapped it with a pen. As you can see, both approaches to the bridge provide ingress and egress to community amenities. That places them under HOA purview. I stood, held up my own survey, the one stamped by Carson County, the one with legal bearings tied to iron pins sunk before our subdivision had a name. "As you can see, Karen," I said, matching her cadence, "the west bank of the creek lies entirely within my metes and bounds. The county easement stops 50 feet up the gravel lane at this T-post. The bridge is not an amenity. It's my driveway." A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, eyes moving between my paper and Karen's laminate, like they were watching tennis. Karen kept smiling the way people smile at toddlers who say impossible things. "We'll take this under advisement," she said, "which is HOA 4. We'll do what we want." 2 weeks later, I found the first cement truck rattling across my board's drum, spinning a gray heartbeat men in neon vests, hanging off the running boards like ornaments. They were headed to Phase 1, a future tennis complex that had more funding than votes, more swagger than plan. The driver waved like we were old friends. I waved back with my whole arm and every finger but one. I moved fast after that. I sunk a cedar post at the mouth of my approach and screwed on a reflective sign: "Private bridge, 5-ton limit, trespassers will be prosecuted." I added a chain across 2 bollards with a keyed latch because people obey chains more than language. Then I called Karen. "You're trespassing," I said when she picked up. "We're improving the neighborhood," she answered. "A little cooperation would go a long way." "Cooperation happens between equals," I said. "Not between a deed and a committee." She exhaled through her nose, her version of a laugh. "I'll send compliance over to take a look." "Send a surveyor," I said, and hung up. By lunchtime, the chain was cut and the sign was gone. In its place, zip-tied to my post, hung a pastel notice in cheerful font: "Non-compliance. Unauthorized restrictive device. Remove within 24 hours or be fined." I took a photo of it, then another of the boot prints leading to the creek, then the sheared padlock glittering in the dirt. Paper can lie. Pictures don't. Neighbors started choosing sides the way people choose weather forecasts, whichever report flattered their plans. Hannah from 2 doors down texted, "I'm with you. This is ridiculous." Darren from the cul-de-sac posted in the community forum, "Bridges are meant to be crossed. Don't be selfish." Miguel brought over coffee and a raised eyebrow. "They're bold," he said. "They're bored," I said. Bold gets you a statue, bored gets you stupid. Karen scheduled another meeting. I went out of respect for the few board members who still remembered we were neighbors. She had arranged the chairs in a circle, which is what people do when they plan to steamroll you and want it to look like a conversation. A projector splashed slides on the wall, Community Access Plan Phase 1, photos of pickleball courts, families with perfect teeth, clip art of a creek without a bridge. Mike, she purred, we recognize your contribution to the spirit of this community. Spirit is not binding, I said. Surveys are. She clicked to a slide labeled Easement Clarification and read a paragraph that sounded legal if you didn't listen. It cited a policy manual printed by a landscaping company and an excerpt from a state statute that applies to public subdivisions, not private parcels. I let her finish, then placed a manila folder on the folding table like I was laying down a pair of aces. Inside were my warranty deed, the recorded plat, the county GIS printout, and a letter from the road commission chair, confirming in very boring language that the public easement terminates at the end of the gravel lane and does not include private structures spanning natural watercourses. Karen skimmed the first line, smiled wider, and slid the folder back like I'd offered her dessert. We'll have council review, she said. In the meantime, construction continues. In the meantime, I said, trespass continues. That night, I stood on the bridge and listened. The creek talked in the steady syllables. It always uses bumping stones, tapping roots, flattering itself against the pilings. I ran a flashlight along the underside, the cord beams still true, the joist hangers snugged, the carriage bolts bright in their countersinks. I measured deflection at midspan under my truck, less than a quarter inch, well within what Miguel and I had designed for. It wasn't the bridge I doubted, it was the people who refused to understand it. The next morning, the second truck came at daybreak long before emails can object to anything. I stepped onto the decking as it approached and held up my hand like a traffic cop in a movie. The driver slowed. Karen in the passenger seat rolled the window down. Her sunglasses were big enough to double as riot shields. Morning, I said. You're over the weight limit. She pointed at the middle distance, where the future courts would be if they ever became more than slides. Community project, she said. You're obstructing progress. The sign clearly says 5 tons, I said. You're 3 times that with a half load. The sign, she said, was not approved by the board. I leaned slightly closer so she could hear the smile in my voice. The bridge wasn't either. She rolled up the window. The driver revved. I stepped off and let the creek keep the minutes. The boards hummed under the drum's slosh. The handrails quivered like reeds. The truck made it across barely, and the driver slapped the door twice like he'd won something. Behind him, a plank showed a hairline crack glinting silver in the sun where the sealer had split. Not failure, a warning. That's when I put up the second sign, the ugly one, trespassers will be prosecuted. I don't like threats. But sometimes language needs an edge to be heard over engines. I mounted 2 trail cameras high in the alders aimed so they could see license plates and faces in the side mirrors. I logged times and loads in a spiral notebook. Data is just a story with receipts. The third truck came at noon as if to prove a point. They always come in threes, storms, bad ideas, cement trucks, piloted by hubris. When it rolled onto the approach, I didn't wave, didn't argue, didn't block the path with my body. I stood on the bank and watched physics draft a complaint letter more eloquent than mine. The decking bowed. The guardrail stanchions groaned. The midspan, perfectly fine under normal life, whispered a sentence. Only engineers here. I can carry this once, maybe twice, but I won't forgive. Late that afternoon, Karen taped another notice to my post. Final warning. She chose pink paper this time, maybe to soften the threat. The bottom line read, failure to comply will result in escalating fines. I snapped a photo of her hand as she pressed the tape color on her nails, the HOA bracelet on her wrist, the ring with the little gavel charm she wore like a crown you can wash dishes in. The camera captured something else too, the smile that comes from mistaking patience for weakness. That evening, Hannah brought peach cobbler and gossip. They told people you refused to let an ambulance cross last year, she said, horrified at the lie, even as she repeated it. Funny, I said. I built the bridge wide enough for one. People are scared to speak up, she said. People should try measuring instead. She laughed, then looked at the cracked plank like it was a bruise on skin. You going to do something? Oh, I am, I said. But I'm not going to shout. I'm going to document. Some fights are won with volume. Mine would be won with ounces. The weight of paper, the small click of a shutter, the careful turn of a wrench on a hidden bolt. They had a committee. I had gravity. And gravity doesn't need a vote. By the time the sun slid behind the pines and the creek went back to its vowel sounds, I'd come to a decision that felt like setting a nail straight with one true blow. Tomorrow I'd stop playing defense. I'd stop trying to convince people who'd already chosen not to understand. If they wanted to keep crossing a line, I'd show them where it was in a language they couldn't ignore. I locked the gate to the porch, poured 2 fingers of the good bourbon, and set the trail cam feeds on my tablet, one at the approach, one at midspan. In the quiet, I could hear everything I needed, the faint whir of the camera's infrared, the steady chorus of the creek, and beneath it all, a drumbeat far away on the county road, patient as weather. They would come again. They always do. And when they did, the bridge and the law behind it would be ready. Miguel showed up the next morning in his old blue Ford toolbox, rattling in the bed thermos in hand. He still had that slow grin that said he'd seen too much and survived it anyway. "Heard you got a traffic problem," he said. "More like a weight problem," I replied, leading him down toward the bridge. We stood there a long while, both of us silent, listening to the water curl around the pilings. Miguel crouched, tapped one of the stringers with a wrench, and nodded. "Still solid," he said. "Your work holds." "Yeah," I said. "I built it for life, not for HOA-sized egos." He chuckled, the sound dry as gravel. "So what's the plan, amigo? You want me to fix it or teach a lesson?" "Both," I said. Miguel rubbed his jaw. "A lesson in engineering, then." We went back to my garage, where the smell of oil and cedar mixed with coffee grounds. I unrolled the original plans of the bridge across the workbench, faded blue paper edges curled like old leaves. "You remember when we designed the midspan reinforcement?" I asked. He traced a line with his finger. "Yeah, dual plate girders tied with carriage bolts, rated for 15 tons distributed load." "Exactly," I said. "But see this section here. If I remove these 4 bolts, the load shifts entirely to the outer beams," Miguel finished. "Still safe for light traffic, but anything heavier than 10 tons and the center gives just enough to make a point," I said. He gave me a look that was half admiration, half caution. "You're not planning to kill anyone, right? I'm planning to let physics do what HOA meetings never could: set boundaries." Miguel poured us both coffee and leaned against the workbench. "You're gonna need proof. They'll call it sabotage." "I already have proof," I said, tapping my laptop. "Trail cams, time stamps, truck weights, every crossing logged." He raised an eyebrow. "Still, if you're gonna make a statement, you better make it clean. Engineers don't break things. We demonstrate failure modes." "That's exactly what I intend to do," I said. That afternoon, we got to work. I pulled off the decking near the midspan, unbolting 1 plank at a time, while Miguel measured angles with a laser level. We replaced the central reinforcement plates with a set that looked identical but were connected by shear pins designed to bend and disengage if overloaded. Nothing illegal, nothing unsafe for normal use. But a cement truck would feel it like an earthquake. We tested it with my pickup. The bridge creaked, held settled back into silence. Perfect. Then we wired a motion-triggered camera under the deck facing upward and another on the far bank watching the approach. Every truck, every driver, every license plate, it would all be on record. By dusk, the bridge looked untouched. I swept sawdust into the creek and rinsed the mud off my hands. Miguel stood beside me, eyes glinting in the fading light. "You ever think about retirement?" he asked. "I did," I said. "But apparently I'm the entertainment committee now." He laughed. "You're crazy, Mike, but I like it." Before he left, Miguel clapped me on the shoulder. "Remember, let them walk into their own mistake. Don't rush it." "I won't," I said. "Karen's too proud to slow down." Over the next few days, I played the waiting game. HOA trucks rumbled through the neighborhood horns, blaring, dust rising. Karen strutted around in her red windbreaker with the HOA logo clipboard in hand, like she was inspecting troops. One morning I was sipping coffee on the porch when I heard that familiar growl, the deep diesel throat of a cement mixer. It came from the cul-de-sac tires grinding gravel. I grabbed my tablet and pulled up the live feed. Karen was there, of course, standing beside the truck, shouting directions with her hands on her hips. She waved the driver forward, motioning toward my bridge. I felt a twist of adrenaline in my chest. "Here we go," I whispered. The truck lumbered down the slope, its weight pressing into the planks like a slow heartbeat. The boards flexed normal deflection. Then it reached the center, and the shear pins performed their quiet magic, a subtle sag, a whisper of complaint, just enough to tilt the load. The driver stopped. Karen leaned out, yelling something I couldn't hear. The truck reversed, groaning, then crept forward again. The bridge held. Barely. When it reached the other side, a small puff of wood dust rose from the deck where the joint had bent. I smiled. Not yet, but soon. That night, Miguel called. "Test run," he asked. "Successful," I said. Bridge spoke politely. He chuckled. Next time, maybe louder. Next time's coming, I said. 2 mornings later, the HOA scheduled another major pour for the tennis courts. 3 trucks, Karen supervising personally. I'd overheard her bragging to the neighbors that the bridge nonsense was resolved. By 7 a.m., I was set up on my porch with a cup of black coffee and a camera zoomed to perfection. The creek glimmered like liquid glass still and patient. The first truck rumbled into view, its drum spinning, sloshing gray cement like a giant stomach. The second followed close behind. Karen walked in front, pointing with a rolled blueprint as if conducting an orchestra of arrogance. When the first truck hit the bridge, the decking groaned. Birds scattered, water rippled beneath. Then came the second. The sound changed, a low creak turning into a wooden moan. One of the shear pins surrendered with a clean metallic snap. The midspan dipped just enough to throw the truck's front wheels off balance. The driver slammed the brakes, but momentum had already signed the check. The cab lurched downward, the rear drum tilting as a wave of cement surged forward and spilled through the open hatch. In one magnificent slow-motion moment, gray sludge cascaded into the creek, coating the rocks like frosting. The truck's front axle dipped into the shallow water with a splash that could be heard halfway down the street. Karen screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, more like disbelief wrapped in rage. "You're done, Mike, you're going to jail." I stepped off my porch and walked toward her, calm as a Sunday sermon. "Morning, Karen," I said. "You might want to read the sign next time." She pointed furiously. "You sabotaged the bridge." "No," I said, "you sabotaged common sense." She turned to the police officer arriving on scene, someone she'd obviously called in advance, expecting to witness my humiliation. The officer surveyed the scene: 1 stuck cement truck, 1 very angry woman, and a perfectly intact sign reading 5-ton limit. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "that's well within his rights. This is private property." The bridge had a posted restriction. Karen's jaw went slack. "But it's a community route." The officer looked at her clipboard. "Do you have documentation of that?" Her silence said everything. I took out my phone, showed the video feed from the camera. "See, overweight vehicle. Warning sign visible. Driver ignored it." The officer nodded. "Seems clear to me." Miguel, who had arrived by then, whispered, "You planned this too well." "Just planned it enough," I said. Karen tried to climb onto the truck to retrieve her clipboard, slipped and ended up ankle-deep in cementy water. The crowd that had gathered, neighbors, curious onlookers, tried not to laugh. Tried but failed. The officer offered her a hand. She refused it. Pride always weighs more than cement. As the tow crew arrived to pull the truck free, I stood back and let the scene play itself out. The bridge held scarred, but triumphant. It had carried the weight and delivered the message. That evening, I reviewed the footage frame by frame. The sound of the pin snapping the splash, the moment Karen's eyes widened, that was art. I saved it on 3 drives and sent a copy to my lawyer just in case. Karen, of course, didn't take defeat quietly. By sundown, she'd filed a complaint with the county and blasted a mass email accusing me of reckless endangerment and deliberate destruction of shared infrastructure. I poured myself a drink, looked out at the bridge gleaming silver in the moonlight, and smiled. Let her file whatever she wanted. I had video permits and physics on my side, and this was only the beginning. Because if Karen thought a half-sunk cement truck was the end of my patience, she had no idea what the next chapter of this little war would bring. The bridge had drawn the line. Now I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly where it was carved. By dawn the next morning, the entire neighborhood buzzed like a hornet's nest. The HOA email thread had exploded overnight subject lines in all caps: urgent O, incident private bridge, failure community, safety at risk. You'd think I'd collapsed a freeway instead of mildly inconveniencing a cement truck. I woke to the sound of helicopters, or so I thought. Turned out it was 2 drones hovering above my property, both stamped with bright HOA stickers. One of them had Karen's husband's name printed on the controller. Real subtle. I stepped outside in my robe coffee, steaming in hand, and gave them a friendly wave. "Make sure you get my good side," I called up. One drone dipped lower like it wanted to argue. Miguel rolled into the driveway a few minutes later, grinning. "Your bridge is trending," he said. I raised an eyebrow. Trending, he held up his phone. Sure enough, someone had uploaded a 30-second clip of the incident. Title: HOA President's Cement Truck Sinks on Homeowner's Bridge, Instant Karma. The view count was climbing by the second. The thumbnail was perfect. Karen mid-scream, half-submerged, clipboard clutched like a drowning flag. I took a sip of coffee. "Well," I said, "at least she finally built something viral." Miguel snorted. "You better lawyer up. She's not going to take this lying down." He was right. By noon, I'd received 2 official notices, one from the HOA board accusing me of reckless endangerment, and another from Karen herself, a cease and desist letter written in Comic Sans. She'd CC'd the sheriff, the county inspector, and for some reason the local garden club. I printed it out and pinned it to my fridge like a trophy. That afternoon, Karen marched down my gravel lane flanked by 2 HOA security officers wearing fluorescent vests and clipboards. They stopped at the start of the bridge, what was left of the concrete truck still being winched out by a recovery crew. Karen's face was red, her hair plastered to her forehead. "You've destroyed community property, Mike," she barked. "Community property?" I asked. "Funny, I must have missed the part where the HOA paid to build this." "This bridge services our development," she shot back. "You've endangered our residents." I pointed at the sign still bolted to the post, "Private bridge, 5-ton limit. Your trucks endangered themselves." Karen jabbed a manicured finger toward me. "You tampered with the structure," Miguel standing behind me said quietly. "Lady, he's the one who built it." Karen ignored him. "You'll pay for this. The board has voted unanimously to fine you $25,000 for property damage." I raised an eyebrow. "Property damage to my own property." She crossed her arms. "As president, I can assess penalties for actions that harm the community's value." "Then maybe you should fine yourself," I said, "for flooding the creek with cement." One of the HOA officers snorted and quickly pretended to cough. Karen spun around glaring. "We'll see you in court, Mr. Carter." "Looking forward to it," I said. "Bring a bridge expert, you'll need one." She stormed off her entourage, scrambling to keep up. Miguel chuckled once they were gone. "You poke the bear, she brings drones." "I build a fence, she brings lawyers," I said. "Next steps, probably tanks." By evening, the video had hit 100,000 views. Comments poured in classic HOA overreach. "Karen strikes again, gravity 1, bureaucracy 0. Someone even edited it with dramatic music and labeled it Cement Karma 4 Kelvin's Drone Edition. I didn't post it, but I definitely didn't mind. Meanwhile, Karen was on a warpath. The HOA Facebook page turned into a propaganda machine overnight. She posted grainy photos of the bridge and wrote, "A dangerous structure collapsed under illegal modifications. HO taking action." I commented under it, "Correction structure held. Truck collapsed. Thanks for the free advertising." Within an hour, my comment had 500 likes and 3 dozen laughing emojis. The next day, the county inspector arrived. Older guy, tan uniform, clipboard, thicker than a phone book. "Got a complaint from the HOA," he said, stepping carefully across the bridge. "Said you built this without a permit." "I built it 15 years ago," I said, handing him a folder. "Here's the original construction approval from the county office." He flipped through the papers, nodding. "Looks good to me." Karen must have been watching from her window, because 10 minutes later she came storming down again, heels clacking like gunfire. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Inspection," the man said calmly. "Everything checks out. Mr. Carter's bridge is up to code." Karen's voice rose an octave. "That's impossible. It collapsed." He gestured toward the structure, still perfectly intact, except for one dented railing. "Looks pretty solid to me." She opened her mouth, closed it again, then turned and stomped away, muttering something about bias and conspiracy. The inspector watched her go. "She always like that. Only on weekdays," I said. He laughed. "Well, for what it's worth, you're fine legally. But if she pushes harder, keep your records tight." "Oh, they're tighter than her tennis court budget," I said. He grinned. "Good luck, Mr. Carter." Over the next week, Karen's campaign to paint me as a public menace backfired spectacularly. The local news picked up the story. They loved the video, loved the headline, loved the absurdity of it all. Cement truck meets its match in small-town bridge dispute. They even interviewed me live on camera. I wore my cleanest flannel and my most neutral smile. "Mr. Carter," the reporter asked, "some say this was a deliberate act of sabotage. What do you say to that?" "I say, physics doesn't take sides," I replied. "It just enforces the rules." The clip aired that evening. Karen tried to spin it, claiming she'd been misrepresented, but by then, the internet had already crowned her Cement Karen. Memes flooded social media, her face photoshopped on traffic signs, bridge emojis under every comment. Even the HOA board began to crack. One member, a retired lawyer named Thomas, stopped by my property quietly one morning. Off the record, he said, "You're not the villain here. She's overstepped." Off the record, I said, "I know." He smiled faintly. "You're not alone. Half the neighborhood's tired of her nonsense. If she keeps pushing this, she'll destroy herself." I watched him drive away, gravel crunching under his tires, and thought maybe she already has. Still, Karen wasn't finished. A week later, she called an emergency HOA meeting regarding infrastructure collapse. Flyers were taped to mailboxes like Amber Alerts. I went, of course. Couldn't miss the show. The community hall was packed, folding chairs, murmurs, cell phones recording. Karen stood at the front, a projector glowing behind her. On the screen, a slide titled Public Safety Threat, the Carter Bridge Incident. She launched into a speech about negligence, danger, liability. Every sentence dripped with self-righteousness. Then she played a video, my bridge camera footage she'd clearly obtained through her drone recordings. The crowd gasped when the cement truck tilted. But then she made her mistake. She paused the video and shouted, "This man intentionally weakened a community bridge to harm HOA property." I stood slowly. "Community bridge?" I asked. "Would you like to see the deed, Karen?" I walked to the front, handed her a copy. Page 3, Section 4, private easement ends 50 feet before the creek. You've been trespassing for months. The room erupted into whispers. One neighbor raised his hand. "Wait, so the HOA's been using his bridge illegally?" Karen's face went pale. "That's irrelevant to the safety issue." Thomas, sitting near the back, called out, "Actually, it's completely relevant." Karen started shouting, "You're all missing the point. He's endangering us." Another neighbor muttered, "Pretty sure you endangered yourself, lady." The meeting descended into chaos, phones out, people arguing, Karen red-faced and trembling. She slammed her clipboard on the podium. "This meeting is adjourned," and just like that, the crowd scattered, half laughing, half filming. I walked out into the night with Miguel beside me. "She's unraveling," he said. "Let her," I replied. Sometimes, the best revenge is giving someone enough rope to hang their own arguments. That night I sat on my porch watching the moonlight shimmer on the creek. The bridge was still quiet, loyal as ever. I ran my hand along the rail, feeling the rough grain of the wood under my fingertips. "They called you dangerous," I said softly, "but you were just honest." The trail cam light blinked faintly from under the deck. Karen would come again, maybe with lawyers, maybe with inspectors, maybe even with another truck. But next time, I'd be ready with more than physics. Next time, I'd bring the law. Because if the HOA wanted a fight over boundaries, I was about to show them what a real one looked like. 2 days after the meeting, I got my first official lawsuit. Notice thick envelope, gold HOA seal, and that faint perfume of arrogance that only comes from documents signed by Karen. The letter accused me of willful property destruction, emotional distress, and intentional interference with community infrastructure. She wanted $250, 0 inches damages. I almost laughed hard enough to spill my coffee. Emotional distress, maybe from staring too long at her own reflection. Miguel stopped by just as I finished reading it. He saw the envelope on my porch table, gave a low whistle, and said, "Looks expensive." "Yeah," I said for her. He leaned on the railing. "You gonna fight this?" "Oh, I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm documenting. Fighting's loud. Documentation's permanent." The next week turned my quiet property into a circus. HOA contractors appeared snapping pictures of my bridge from every angle. A county drone hovered above for half an hour. Someone even measured my mailbox, don't ask me why. Karen strutted around with a new folder labeled Evidence. Every time she saw me, she smiled that brittle politician's smile that meant she'd already written my obituary. I started wearing sunglasses just so I could smirk without her seeing. By Friday, the story hit local TV again. A serious anchor in a gray suit stood beside a photo of my bridge and said, "New developments in the HOA bridge dispute." They aired snippets of Karen's interview, her voice trembling theatrically as she said, "He put the entire community in danger for a petty argument. We're lucky no one was killed." Then they cut to my clip, me standing by the railing, arms crossed, saying, "If you ignore the sign, the problem isn't the bridge." Guess which one the viewers believed. Karen, furious that the public wasn't on her side, started sending mass emails. Subject lines like urgent, dangerous neighbor, still at large in community legal defense fund. She was trying to turn the HOA budget into her personal war chest. But Thomas, the lawyer on the board, pushed back. He emailed everyone the HOA charter, highlighting the section that said funds couldn't be used for private lawsuits. His message ended with, "If Karen wants to sue, she does so at her own expense." The next day, her emails stopped. I imagined her kitchen table covered in bills and legal forms, a pot of cold coffee, her phone blowing up with notifications she couldn't control. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. Of course, Karen couldn't let it go. When the legal route got expensive, she tried a new angle, public pressure. She printed flyers with my face on them, grainy photo from the news clip, and the words, "Danger to community safety." She stuck them on lampposts, bulletin boards, even the grocery store window. Hannah texted me a photo of one. "You're famous again," she wrote. I texted back, "Can't wait for the autograph requests." That night, I took my truck a staple gun and a sense of humor and went on a little walk. For every flyer I found, I stapled a new one next to it, same image but with big black letters saying "Wanted Common Sense. Last seen at HOA meeting." By morning, my version had more likes on social media than hers. A few days later, the sheriff came by, not in uniform, just jeans and a baseball cap. He'd seen the video, the news, the flyers, the whole circus. "Mike," he said, standing beside his truck, "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just gotta make sure everything's safe. Safer than a cement truck, I'd say," I told him. He grinned. "That's what I figured. County records show the bridge is yours. No easement, no shared access. You're in the clear. Just keep the peace, all right. I've been trying," I said, "but peace keeps driving 12 tons over my bridge." He laughed, tipped his hat, and left. Karen must have seen the visit from her window because 5 minutes later I got an email from HOA_president@ironwoodcommunity.org, subject trespassing investigation. "I saw a police vehicle on your property today. This behavior confirms our concerns. The HOA will not tolerate intimidation tactics." I replied, "Thanks for the concern, Karen." He stopped by to compliment the bridge. No response. But behind the comedy, things were getting serious. Karen had officially filed her lawsuit in county court. I received the summons the next week. She'd hired Hamilton and Wade LLP, a fancy law firm from downtown that charges by the syllable. I met my lawyer, a sharp woman named Lisa Barrett, who specialized in property disputes. She looked through my documents, the videos, the original blueprints, and smiled like a chess player seeing a checkmate 3 moves away. "She doesn't have a case," Lisa said. "You've got signed surveys, clear ownership, posted restrictions, and video proof that her trucks ignored them. She's not trying to win," I said. "She's trying to exhaust me." Lisa leaned back. "Then, let's make her pay for the privilege." While the legal gears turned, Karen's grip on the HOA began to slip. People were tired of fines for lawn colors, for trash cans for bird feeders. The bridge fiasco had cracked something open. Hannah started a petition, "Vote of No Confidence in HOA Leadership." Within a week, she'd gathered over 70 signatures, enough to force a board election. Karen tried to block it, calling it procedurally invalid. The members ignored her. Thomas stepped forward as interim president. His first act, cancel the tennis court project. His second, send me an email that said simply, "Mike, I'm sorry it came to this. We're cleaning house," literally and figuratively. For the first time in months, I slept easy. Of course, Karen still had one weapon left: the courtroom. The hearing date arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. The courthouse smelled like old paper and revenge. I wore my good jacket. Karen arrived in a red blazer that screamed desperation. She had a stack of papers thick enough to choke a filing cabinet. I had a single binder labeled facts. The judge, an older man with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, took his seat. "Let's hear the plaintiff first." Karen's lawyer stood slick hair and rehearsed outrage. "Your Honor, this man deliberately modified a public structure, endangering community vehicles and causing severe financial losses to the homeowners association." The judge glanced down at the documents. "Mr. Carter, is this bridge on your property?" "Yes, sir," I said, handing him the deed and survey. He examined them for a moment, then turned to Karen. "Mrs. Peterson, do you have documentation proving the HOA's ownership?" Karen stood abruptly. "The bridge connects to community land. It's used by residents daily. Use," the judge said, "is not ownership." Lisa slid a tablet across the table. "Your Honor, if I may, here's video evidence of HOA vehicles ignoring posted weight limits." The courtroom screens lit up with the footage: the cement truck crossing, the snap, the splash, Karen screaming. Someone in the audience laughed before catching themselves. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him down. "I've seen enough." Karen's voice trembled. "He rigged it to fail." I kept my tone calm. "I built it to hold 10 tons. You brought 12. The judge nodded slowly. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm dismissing your claim. And Mr. Carter, you may file for damages if you wish." Karen froze, color draining from her face. Outside, the courthouse reporters waited. Microphones, cameras, the whole show. Mr. Carter one shouted any comment for the community. I smiled. "Just this: never underestimate a well-built bridge." Karen brushed past, eyes red, muttering something about appeals. Lisa nudged me. "You handled that well." "I had practice," I said. "Every HOA meeting is a rehearsal for court." That night I sat by the creek with a beer in hand. The bridge glowed under the porch light, strong as ever. The world was quiet again, almost. Miguel called. "You won, huh?" "More or less," I said. He laughed. "You know she's not done right." "I know," I said. "But next time she won't be facing just me." "Who else? The whole neighborhood." He whistled low. Guess gravity's not the only force on your side. I smiled into the dark. Nope, there's momentum now. The water whispered below, steady, relentless, just like truth. If you've ever been through a lawsuit, you know it doesn't begin with drama, it begins with waiting. Endless grinding, coffee-stained waiting, lawyers trading emails, clerks stamping forms. Karen filing new motions every other day like she was throwing darts in the dark, hoping one might hit something. Lisa, my lawyer, told me to stay calm. She's trying to rattle you, she said. Keep records, keep quiet, and for heaven's sake, don't take the bait online. That last one was harder than it sounded. Because while the legal wheels creaked along, Karen was waging psychological warfare. HOA newsletters suddenly included reminders about dangerous private structures. A neighbor spotted her at the local cafe, telling anyone who'd listen that I was under investigation for property fraud. Fraud. That word burned. I wanted to storm into the next meeting, drop the deed on the table, and watch her choke on her own lies. But Lisa stopped me. You'll win faster in court than in a shouting match. She was right, but I wasn't built for silence. Miguel, bless him, showed up almost every day to keep me from losing my mind. He'd bring tacos, bad jokes, and occasionally updates from the neighborhood gossip circuit. You're the main character of this subdivision, he said one afternoon, chewing thoughtfully. Everyone's taking sides. Half the people think you're a folk hero. The other half think you're a terrorist with power tools. Sounds about right, I said. You should see the memes, he added, pulling out his phone. Someone photoshopped your face on a bridge troll with a stop sign. I laughed. That one's accurate. But the laughter didn't last. Karen was relentless. She'd somehow obtained my building permit records, public information, and started spreading rumors that my bridge had expired safety certification. She even sent a letter to the local paper claiming my structure violated state waterway standards. The paper printed it under opinion. Still, it stung. So I decided to respond the only way I knew how, not with noise but with documentation. I spent an entire weekend digging through old boxes in the attic until I found a dusty binder labeled Ironwood Creek Survey, 2009. Inside were the original county drainage assessments stamped and signed by the Department of Natural Resources. Right there, in neat black ink, it stated Carter Bridge private crossing, no municipal maintenance required. Not only that, it confirmed the creek was not a public waterway. The HOA had zero jurisdiction over it. I scanned everything, filed digital copies, and sent them to Lisa. Her reply was immediate. This changes everything. Don't show anyone until the hearing. I didn't, but I smiled every night knowing I had a quiet weapon sitting in my inbox. Meanwhile, the HOA board was falling apart faster than a cheap deck. Thomas resigned as interim president after receiving hate mail from Karen's supporters. Hannah, bless her, took his place temporarily, promising to restore civility, but Karen still loomed like a storm cloud. She had friends on the board, and she wasn't above emotional blackmail. At the next open meeting, she stood up trembling dramatically and said, Mike Carter has destroyed our sense of community. He's mocked our authority, humiliated this board, and endangered our families. If we don't act now, what message does that send? Hannah calmly replied. That we respect property rights and basic decency, the room murmured. Karen turned bright red, slammed her folder shut, and stormed out. The next morning, someone egged my mailbox. HOA-approved eggs, I assumed. Lisa called that afternoon. The judge has set the preliminary hearing for next month, she said. Be prepared. Karen's attorney will go in aggressive. They'll try to paint you as negligent. Negligent for building a bridge, I asked. For daring to own it, she replied. She wasn't joking. Over the next weeks, I started noticing strange cars idling near my driveway. Drones flew lower than ever. Once I caught a guy in a reflective vest poking around my fence with a clipboard. When I approached him, he muttered something about inspections and left in a hurry. I installed motion lights and added another camera, one pointing directly toward the HOA office down the road. If they wanted to watch me, I'd give them a show. Despite the tension, there were moments of humor that kept me sane. One afternoon, Hannah knocked on my door holding a Tupperware of banana bread. I figured you could use some support, she said. Thanks, I said. What's the latest HOA rumor? She grinned. That you've built an underground bunker beneath the bridge. I burst out laughing. If only. Maybe I should start charging tolls. Her expression softened. You know, people are realizing what's happening. They're tired of her control. She's unraveling, Mike. I hope so, I said, because I'm running out of coffee. The calm before court was deceptive. From the outside, everything seemed still. No new emails, no letters, no public fights. But underneath the HOA machine was humming, collecting signatures, pushing narratives. Karen wasn't retreating, she was regrouping. One evening I got a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was low nervous. "Mr. Carter, it's Jacob. I'm the HOA treasurer. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Karen's been editing documents." "Editing," I said. "Like what?" "She changed the HOA map on record, the one showing property lines. She moved the boundary 50 feet onto your land." My grip tightened on the phone. "That's forgery." "I know," he said quickly, "but I'm not getting dragged into this. I'm sending you a copy of the original before she changed it. Do what you want with it. Just don't mention me." He hung up. I opened the email 5 minutes later. Sure enough, there it was, the old HOA map versus the revised version. The difference was obvious. My property line had magically shifted like tectonic plates on command. I forwarded it straight to Lisa. Her reply came in seconds. "Unbelievable. Keep this quiet. We'll use it when it hurts most." I smiled. The bridge wasn't the only trap now. Weeks passed. The town moved on, or tried to. The video's views crossed 2 million. Merch popped up online, "Don't cross my bridge" mugs, "Cement happens" t-shirts. I didn't make a cent, but the irony was delicious. Meanwhile, Karen avoided me completely. No more drones, no more shouting, no more letters. It was eerie, like the forest before a wildfire. I spent the time repairing the bridge properly this time. Replaced the warped decking, retightened bolts, added fresh sealant. Miguel helped humming as he worked. "You know," he said, "there's something poetic about fixing what they tried to destroy." "Yeah," I said. "Poetic justice." He winked. "Save that line for court." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight shimmered off the creek, silvering the water like spilled mercury. I walked onto the bridge barefoot, feeling every vibration through the boards. This thing had started as wood and bolts. Now it was a symbol of boundaries, of patience, of the one line I refused to let anyone erase. I leaned against the railing, whispering to the dark, "Tomorrow we end this." The creek gurgled like it was answering back. Morning came sharp and cold. I dressed in a clean shirt, tucked my evidence folder under my arm, and met Lisa in the courthouse lobby. She looked confident. "You ready, born ready?" I said. But let's make sure she's not. Karen was already there, pacing in heels too high for common sense, clutching her binder like a shield. She saw me and hissed under her breath, "Enjoy it while it lasts." "Oh, I intend to," I said. Lisa gave me a small smile. "Stay calm. She'll talk herself into the hole." I nodded. But inside I could feel the storm brewing the final act. The calm was over. Tomorrow the bridge would speak again, not through wood or bolts this time, but through truth. And this time even Karen wouldn't see what was coming. The courthouse in Carson County wasn't built for drama. It was built for zoning disputes, tax appeals, and the occasional drunk who punched a mailbox. But that morning it looked like the stage for a soap opera. Reporters lined the hallway. HOA members filled the benches in their pastel outfits, whispering like they'd come to watch a live execution. Karen was there, of course, red blazer, pearl earrings, every hair in place. Her lawyer, a sleek young man in a $1,000 suit, looked like he'd rehearsed his outrage in front of a mirror. Lisa leaned toward me and whispered, "Remember, she's going to overplay it. Let her." I nodded. My hands were steady. I'd already won this fight in silence weeks ago. She just didn't know it yet. The judge entered, gray hair, steady eyes, a face that said he'd seen enough HOA nonsense to last 10 lifetimes. He adjusted his glasses. Case 22 to 3,417 Ironwood Homeowners Association versus Michael Carter. Karen's lawyer rose dramatically. "Your Honor, this case is about negligence, about one man's reckless disregard for community safety. The defendant deliberately tampered with a bridge used by residents, resulting in a collapse that endangered lives and cost our clients thousands." I sat still, watching him gesture like a magician trying to distract the audience. He clicked a remote, and on the screen behind him appeared the infamous photo, the cement truck tilted sideways, Karen screaming mid-sentence. "This image," he said solemnly, "represents the danger this man created." Lisa leaned close and murmured, "That image represents your victory. They just don't know it." The judge nodded. "Mr. Carter, your opening." Lisa stood calm and precise. "Your Honor, this case isn't about negligence. It's about entitlement. My client built, owns, and maintains a private bridge on his land. The HOA repeatedly ignored posted weight limits, trespassed, and caused their own damage. We have documentation, video proof, and legal surveys to prove it." The judge's eyebrow twitched, the courtroom equivalent of a standing ovation. Karen's lawyer smirked. "We'll see." The first witness was Karen herself. She marched to the stand like she was auditioning for a crime drama. swore the oath, then turned toward the audience as if she had a fan club. "Mrs. Peterson," her lawyer began, "can you describe the incident in your own words?" She took a deep breath. "Yes, thank you. It was a beautiful morning until he decided to sabotage community property. I was overseeing the construction of our tennis court, a project approved by the HOA for everyone's benefit. Suddenly, the bridge gave way. It was terrifying." Her lawyer nodded solemnly. "And you believe Mr. Carter intentionally weakened it?" "I know he did," she said, eyes flashing. "He's been hostile toward the HOA since day one. He even told me once that gravity would teach us boundaries." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Lisa stood slowly. "Mrs. Peterson, may I ask how many times did your vehicles cross Mr. Carter's bridge before this collapse?" Karen hesitated. "Several. Specifically, maybe 10 or 12. Lisa smiled. "And each time you ignored the posted 5-ton weight limit?" Karen straightened her shoulders. "Those signs weren't official." "Do you mean they weren't approved by you?" The courtroom chuckled. Karen's lawyer objected, but the judge waved it off. Lisa continued. "Mrs. Peterson, are you aware that your cement truck weighed nearly 12 tons? Karen froze. "And are you aware that the county's official map lists Mr. Carter's bridge as a private access crossing?" Her lips parted. That's incorrect." Lisa walked to the evidence table and held up the county document. "This is the original plat map from the Department of Transportation. It clearly marks the bridge as private. Would you like to read it?" Karen tried to smile, but her face twitched instead. I don't need to." "Good," Lisa said, returning to her seat. "Because the judge will." Next came Miguel. He walked to the stand in his denim jacket and work boots, looking every bit the retired engineer who'd seen more common sense than most bureaucrats combined. "Mr. Alvarez," Lisa began, "you helped construct the bridge 15 years ago." "Yes, ma'am. Was it built to standard, better than standard?" "We over-engineered it. That bridge could handle 10 tons safely. Maybe 11 in a pinch. But you don't argue with physics." Lisa smiled. "And the HOA's truck, nearly 12. You do the math." Karen's lawyer tried to poke holes. "Mr. Alvarez, are you saying the bridge was designed to fail?" Miguel leaned forward. "No. It was designed to be respected." Laughter broke out. Even the judge smiled before banging his gavel for order. By lunchtime, Karen was fuming. Her lawyer whispered furiously, flipping pages while she scowled across the aisle at me. I took a sip of water and gave her a polite nod. After recess, it was my turn to testify. Lisa kept it simple. "Mr. Carter, what were your intentions that morning when the bridge sagged under the HOA truck?" "To protect my property," I said. "To remind people that boundaries mean something." "Did you intentionally endanger anyone?" "No, ma'am. I built that bridge to carry families, not egos." The judge chuckled under his breath. Karen's lawyer rose, pacing dramatically. "Mr. Carter, you admit to modifying the bridge before the incident." "Yes, I repaired it," I said, "like any responsible homeowner would. You adjusted its structure, I reinforced it." He leaned closer. "Is it true that you installed a mechanism that could shift under weight?" "Yes," I said. "It's called a load distribution system. You can find it in any engineering handbook." The lawyer blinked, caught off guard. "And what happened when the HOA trucks exceeded the limit?" "The system distributed the load," I said evenly, "into the creek." The courtroom erupted in laughter again. The judge didn't stop them this time. By late afternoon, Karen's lawyer was drowning in objections of his own making. Every piece of evidence he presented, drone photos, complaint letters, edited maps, backfired. Lisa calmly pointed out inconsistencies, one after another. Finally, the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Peterson, this so-called revised HOA map, where did you get it?" Karen stammered. It was approved by our board." Lisa stood. "Your Honor, I have the original version sent to my client by the HOA treasurer before it was altered." The judge compared them side by side. The room went dead silent. "This boundary shift," he said slowly, "is illegal." Karen's lawyer paled. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge." The judge raised a hand. "Enough. This case is no longer about a bridge. It's about falsified documents and harassment." Karen looked like she'd been struck. "That's not... I didn't, Mrs. Peterson," the judge said, his tone icy. "I strongly advise you to remain silent before you make things worse." Lisa closed her folder. "No further witnesses, Your Honor." The judge leaned back, eyes sweeping the courtroom. "I've seen many HOA disputes in my years, some over mailboxes, others over lawn height. But this is the first time I've seen someone drown their credibility in wet cement." The audience laughed softly. He continued, This court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Carter. The HOA's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this matter for review of potential document tampering. The gavel fell like thunder. Karen's lawyer deflated into his chair. Karen sat frozen eyes, glassy mouth trembling. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look on her face was payment enough. As we walked out, Lisa leaned over and said, "That's checkmate." I smiled. "Not quite. There's one more move." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah," I said, "the twist." Because what Karen didn't know yet, what no one in that room knew, was that I'd found something else in those old survey files. Something about the creek, the land beneath it, and the rights that came with it. The real story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The courthouse emptied like a storm passing over a dry field, fast, noisy, and full of whispers. Karen sat motionless at the plaintiff's table, staring at the gavel like it was a guillotine that had missed her neck by an inch. Her lawyer packed up his files with the defeated precision of a man billing for every second of humiliation. Lisa and I stepped out into the cool afternoon air. She exhaled. "You handled that perfectly, Mike. Clean win." "Not clean enough," I said, looking back at the courthouse doors. "She'll file appeals, drag the HOA through more drama, spin this however she can. That woman treats defeat like it's a temporary glitch." Lisa smiled wryly. "You've still got that ace, don't you? The one you wouldn't show me before today?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's time." The next morning, the HOA called an emergency post-trial meeting. I went, not to argue to end it. The hall was packed, standing room only. Some folks were there out of anger, others out of curiosity, but most were there for spectacle. Karen sat at the front, pale but defiant. Her red blazer was replaced with navy, as if color could restore credibility. Her voice trembled, but she still had that politician's tone, part confidence, part performance. The court's decision, she began, was based on incomplete information. The HOA board will be filing an appeal. "We will not surrender the safety of this community to," Karen, I interrupted, gently stepping forward. "You might want to hold that thought." Every head turned. "I brought something the court didn't see," I said, holding up a thick envelope. "Not because it wasn't relevant then, but because it's more relevant now." Her eyes narrowed. "More of your theatrics," I smiled. "Documentation." Thomas, now reinstated as a board member, gestured toward the projector. "Let's hear him." I walked to the front and plugged in a flash drive. The lights dimmed, and on the screen appeared a scanned government document stamped in red: U.S. Federal Highway Administration, Private Access Corridor License, 2006. The room fell silent. "This," I said, "is a 20-year federal permit issued for the Carter property, authorizing a private access crossing over Ironwood Creek. The creek itself was declared non-navigable and privately managed under state and federal law." I flipped to the next slide. "Meaning, not only is this bridge mine, but the land and water beneath it are excluded from HOA oversight by federal exemption. You never owned it, Karen. You never even had the right to set foot on it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's jaw clenched. "You fabricated this." I clicked again, showing an official letter from the Department of Transportation dated 6 months prior, confirming the permit's renewal and digital verification. I turned back to her. "If I fabricated it, you can call the DOT and ask for yourself. They'll send you a copy. Though I doubt they'll appreciate being dragged into your next HOA memo." Miguel, sitting in the back, let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Karen's composure cracked. "You're exploiting a technicality," she shouted. "A technicality," I repeated. "It's called property law. You should try reading it sometime." Hannah, who'd been sitting quietly near the front, stood up. "Karen, you lied to all of us. You told us the creek and bridge were community assets. You used HOA funds for a lawsuit we didn't approve." "That's not true," Karen snapped. Thomas raised a hand. "It is true. We reviewed the accounts. You diverted nearly $40,000 from maintenance funds to pay legal fees. The board never voted on that." A wave of murmurs spread. Someone in the back yelled, "Is that why our streetlights stopped working?" Karen stammered, I was acting in good faith." "No," I said softly. "You were acting in control. There's a difference." The crowd began to turn, their voices rising like a tide. "Resign, resign." Karen slammed her hand on the table. "You think you've won, Mike. You're just one man with a bridge." I looked at her evenly. "You're right, but that bridge carried truth, and you drove right over it." The room erupted into laughter, not cruel but cathartic. The kind of laughter that breaks months of tension. Karen's face turned crimson. Thomas cleared his throat. Effective immediately, I motioned to remove Mrs. Peterson from her role as HOA president for misuse of funds, falsifying documents, and defamation of a homeowner. The motion passed unanimously. Karen stood frozen, trembling eyes darting from face to face like she was looking for someone to save her. No one did. When it was over, she gathered her folders and stormed out. For once, there were no cameras, no drones, no audience left to admire her downfall. Outside, she stopped by my truck as I was loading my bag. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "It is for you," I said. "But if you want to cross that bridge again, make sure you ask permission first." She opened her mouth to reply, then thought better of it, turned and walked away. A week later, I received an official letter from the new HOA board. It wasn't a threat or a warning or a fine. It was an apology. Mr. Carter, the Ironwood HOA formally apologizes for the misconduct of our former president. We acknowledge your legal ownership of the Carter Bridge and surrounding property. We also wish to thank you for your patience and your example of standing up for one's rights. Attached was a check for $10,000 reimbursement for legal fees. I didn't cash it. I framed it and hung it in the hallway. That was better art than anything I could buy. Life in Ironwood changed after that. The drones disappeared. The tennis court project was scrapped. The HOA meetings went from screaming matches to potlucks. For the first time in years, neighbors actually waved when they drove by instead of pretending they didn't see me. Even the creek seemed quieter, like it was exhaling after holding its breath through months of chaos. Miguel came over one evening with 2 beers. So he said, sitting on the bridge rail, "What's next for the man who defeated an HOA retirement?" I said. "For real this time." He laughed. "Sure, until someone parks on your property line again." I shrugged. "Then I'll just build another bridge." We sat there in silence as the sun dipped low, turning the water into gold. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not the kind that comes from quiet, but from closure. A few days later, I posted a short video on my social media. It was just me standing on the bridge, holding my old survey map. Sometimes I said into the camera, "You don't need revenge. You just need the truth and the patience to let gravity do the rest." The clip went viral again. Comments flooded in. Man turned engineering into art. Karen drove herself into her own trap. HOA stories never disappoint. I smiled reading them. Not because I wanted fame, but because somewhere out there another homeowner was probably dealing with their own, Karen wondering if they had the strength to fight back. They did. They just needed a bridge. Now, every time I walk across those planks, freshly sealed, solid as ever, I remember every argument, every letter, every shouted meeting that tried to tear it apart. The boards creak a little the way old friends do when they stretch. The water murmurs below a language older than law, older than pride. I pause halfway across, look out over the quiet creek and whisper, "We did it." Because in the end, it wasn't about land or lawsuits or even victory. It was about balance, the kind nature enforces long after people forget who drew the boundaries. Sometimes justice doesn't need a hammer, just a little weight. Some battles aren't fought with fists or fury, they're fought with patience, proof, and principle. When someone crosses your line, don't rush to shout louder, stand firmer. The truth has a way of holding its own, just like a well-built bridge. This story isn't about revenge, it's about respect. About how one person's arrogance can collapse under the quiet weight of accountability. And about how standing your ground doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it just means knowing what's yours and refusing to let anyone rewrite it. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that forgot its limits, or a neighbor who mistook kindness for weakness, remember this: calm is not surrender, silence is not defeat. Every bridge has its limit, and when people ignore it, they eventually fall in on their own. Now it's your turn. Have you ever faced someone like Karen? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one. And if you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because in this neighborhood, there's always another story waiting to be crossed.